So the last podcast I recorded, Calculus, was really about my current thinking, or really a project that I'm setting myself quietly. Last year was remarkably productive. I got out quite a bit of writing, and it really was a focused effort after I hit my head and was hospitalised. And my view is that drive around that, it's not that it doesn't exist anymore, it's just that I've done what I wanted to do through that process, and now I'm really questioning what I need to do with regards to my other software. My other projects, most of which is in software. Now, obviously something very dramatic has changed in my life in the past 2 years. My daughters have been born, and I'm really putting them as a focus. So reducing time on projects is a big part of that, but really thinking about the kind of projects I want to be working on and why I want to be working on them. Simulated Ape runs through Metal, and Metal is very good, or it certainly works very well in the urban simulation when it's only dealing with a single window. When it's dealing with multiple windows, there's a bunch of stuff that goes on behind the scenes which really doesn't make it particularly stable to run the kind of graphics I want to be running at the kind of speeds I want to be running them. So it begs the question, do I go back to core graphics, or do I just realise that Metal, will it get in a fully baked state? Well, I removed it and waited and put it back to get it back in a baked state. It's almost there with regards to a debug build, but with a release build, it's just ripping information that I need out from underneath me at an alarming rate, and unfortunately, running the simulation, you do encounter this if you build it in release build. So, what does that mean in terms of time frame? Well, that's a whole lot of additional time, which I've already started spending trying to get things to be in places you want them to be when you want them to be in, which is a large part of programming. So, is that a project I want to deal with? That is becoming a secondary project. So, Simulated Ape moves to a secondary project. Urban Sim, I think, still should be a primary project. And what's interesting over the past few days is that I've been looking at similar communities of similar sizes. Well, when I say similar communities, very few communities are like the Artificial Life community was. But I've looked into what are called roguelike games, with the view that if I map my simulation into this interface, which is basically a text-based character interface with movement around that, I would probably gain some users out of that, but it is a very distinct project and nothing is there currently that would make it this way. It's also, in terms of the examples that are available, very heavily polluted with the GPL, the GNU Public License, which is something that I've kept away from my open source historically, and I don't want to start developing into GNU stuff. It just makes my current work that much more complicated. So I'm left to pause potentially creating a roguelike artificial life simulation, which would look pretty cool, but is just outside the remit of my time frame currently. And I'm returning to Urban Sim. Now, Urban Sim is in a state where it's nearly London 1940, but it's not quite there. And that, I think, is what's going to be the most of my time in the near future when I have time to write simulation. I did want to go back and just say a little bit more about the time that I worked on the writing. This was really where all my free time was focused on the writing. So obviously spending time with my daughters, work, these things, but the remaining free time that I had every week was obsessively focused on this writing. It doesn't scale particularly well, particularly with tiredness and other things. So my view is that that kind of focus was useful for the writing, but I don't think I'll get that focus with regards to Urban Sim. I just need to be comfortable in returning to it and getting some stuff done. I had written the start of a protocol called L40, which linked Urban Sim with London 1940 by a single JSON format, and I think that might yield some work in the foreseeable future. When I talk about the foreseeable future, I'm really talking about the next 6 months. That's the kind of time frame that I'm projecting currently. The writing, paused, done as much as necessary. But I think the simulation software is where my heart and time should be based. And actually, London 1940, I was on the cusp of saying, look, Urban Sim is far more important. Maybe we just point all the London 1940 stuff to Urban Sim and say, that's where my time is going currently. That's a pretty accurate account. But I don't think I need to make that many large moves and that many documented moves at this stage. I just need to get my time available and focus what time I have on this. Now, it's very interesting. I'm going to record a My Rules Are Better after this particular recording, because obviously in parallel to this, I have another podcast, another hobby, sort of. Well, almost. The roguelike stuff was interesting, and that's worthy of a secondary discussion. So if you have the time and you listen to My Rules Are Better, or if you want to listen to My Rules Are Better, I'm going to record one about a roguelike when I conclude this recording. So that's my thinking currently. Unfortunately, Metal is still I don't know. It was one of these problems of being an early adopter. You're an early adopter, and then you have to deal with all the flack of being an early adopter. It runs really well through a single window. Like, the Urban Sim uses Metal, and quite frankly, it runs very well through a single window. But the Urban Sim has my own hand-rolled version of OpenGL that I had to create because Apple removed support for OpenGL. So, swings and roundabouts, very definitely. Tom Bartlett, Las Vegas, Nevada, signing out.